Sekeres Price for Monday, March 11th, 2024, coming to you from the Go-Goat Sports Studio, built by Arbor Lee, here at the iconic Wall Center, downtown Vancouver. And if you're heading to a game or an event in downtown Vancouver, and there are a lot of games in March, make it a staycation. Call the Wall, 604-331-1000. Ask for the Sekeres Price rate. Some blackout dates may apply. Matt Sekeres alongside Blake Price. Grace has Hidden Switches conducting things in this show. A presentation of Applewood Auto Group.
And Applewood Nissan in Richmond has a couple of their big brands ready for your taking, like the 2023 Nissan Qashqais, which are still hanging around. Finance them at 2.99% for up to 36 months. Or the Nissan Leaf. Was driving behind a Leaf the other day. I thought, that's a smart-looking electric vehicle. And you can get up to $13,000 cash back during the rebates. It's all good at Applewood Nissan in Richmond.
Tim Horton's poll question today, we're asking you, have the Canucks leaned on Thatcher Demko too much this season? Yes or no? You can vote at Sekeres Price on Twitter and at YouTube. And on YouTube, roll up to win here for Tim's 60th anniversary. You can play on the Tim's app to win prizes. Daily cash jackpot of $10,000 can win the all-electric Volkswagen ID4 and a sun-soaked Hilton getaway. Download the Tim's app. Roll up is on until March 31st. My answer was yes, just ever so slightly. They were onto a good thing earlier in the season when Casey DeSmith was getting regular starts. Now his level dipped a little. That meant more Thatcher Demko starts. Now here we are talking about a knee injury. Looks like a 2 to 3 week injury. Casey DeSmith is going to get his starts now, partner. We were talking about how many more starts for DeSmith. How many more do they have to get Casey DeSmith? Well, he's going to get them now. So I answered yes on the poll ever so slightly. He's the number 3 goaltender in the league right now with 49 starts. And, look no further than Jake Ottinger and some of the other goalies who have had to play the lion's share and how their level withstands, especially through multiple playoff rounds.
Well, Ottinger in particular is having a very modest year. He's 12th in appearances.
But they've learned their lesson in Dallas, I think.
But that's sort of where I go is sort of, right now for him. I think if you're in Colorado or Nashville with Georgiev and Saros, I think you've got a little bit better case to say there's too much on that guy. But for Demko, he sort of stands in the middle of the highly used. There's 8 goalies who are really used a lot. And he's right in the middle of that pack. So at 49 appearances, that's 3 more than Bobrovsky, Binnington, and Hellebuck and Sorokin, who are 46. And at 8, are we saying that if you're an 8th like Bobrovsky is for minutes here, like that's more tolerable? Sorry, like at 46. So 3 more games? Is that what we're quibbling about? 3 more games?
In some cases, yes, Blake. That's how fine the margins are now with NHL goalie starts.
And I guess my point is what are the chances that 3 games over 5 months is the straw that breaks the camel's back? I think it's, when you're getting into handfuls, then I think you can make stronger cases for this. So I'm going to vote no.
Ian Clark said between 58 and 62, if I'm not mistaken, at the beginning of the season. Now, this injury, it is our top story brought to you by Mr. Lube. This injury, if it does last 2 to 3 weeks, is going to likely mean that Thatcher Demko falls shy of those numbers or falls right on the front end of those numbers.
But even if he was playing, he'd be hard pressed to get past 62. In fact, I would put large sums of money he doesn't get past 62 if he was healthy. I mean, that's him playing 13 of the next 16.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
Except not a lot of back-to-backs, a sort of lighter schedule on some of these weeks.
But if they clinch things late, they're not playing them.
Yep. I would think if they clinch things with several games to go, he probably gets the last one just to make sure that he's sharp for the postseason. But, could see Casey DeSmith getting the final game, depending on how things go. Of course, got to hold off Edmonton here. And look, 2 games this week, not till Wednesday against Colorado, then Saturday against the Capitals. It is a busier week the week thereafter with 3, but Buffalo, Montreal, Calgary. And, when you started to red circle the Casey DeSmith starts, I think some of the that week certainly looked like it was going to be a busy.
Well, we weren't thinking
and then 2 games the week thereafter with just LA and Dallas, and again 2 days in between those games before another 2-day break and a Sunday affair against
5
Anaheim.
of the next 9 games. They've got at least one, in some cases more than one, day off to prepare. And when we red circled that on Friday and Thursday and Friday of last week, I was thinking more in terms of practice for the skaters. But what's going to be interesting is how important that is for Casey DeSmith's preparation now, maybe working with Ian Clark as well, and making sure that DeSmith has everything at his disposal to make sure that he can continue to carry on here for the Vancouver Canucks. So the Demko injury, the DeSmith replacement, our top story brought to you by Mr. Lube, 100% Canadian owned, started in Edmonton by a father and son team, and look at where it's gone. Pioneer of the no appointment oil change, and that's spread to tire service and sales as well, with also no appointments needed. 16 locations in the Lower Mainland. For one day, you go to mrlube.com.
Demko left in the second period, 6 minutes, 40 seconds into the second period on Saturday. The reporting on this is that it's a knee injury and 2 to 3 weeks, but it's funny because JPAD had noted that Demko didn't look 100% right in the morning skate on Saturday, that he appeared in some discomfort. We're also getting listener reports that say he tripped or had to catch himself on his way out to the goal in the second period to start the second period Saturday night at Rogers Arena against the Winnipeg Jets. You may also remember he was feeling sick and had to be pulled from the season opening game against the Edmonton Oilers, where Casey DeSmith featured and did very well. Of course, they had a large cushion in that game, and they had a cushion in this game as well against the Jets, with some calling it amongst the most complete games for the Vancouver Canucks all season. A 5-0 victory. Our old friend Rick Bowness, we typically call him the Happy Haligonian, was anything but in the aftermath. The Jets head coach saying it was the worst game since he had gotten there a couple of years ago. Really harsh on his charges. Did you see the stat that JPAD had against Mark Scheifele? Winnipeg's number one center absolutely caved in by the defense pair of Quinn Hughes and Philip Hronek, and the forward line of Miller, Mikheyev, and Besser had just one shot with that forward line on the ice, had just 2 shots or shot attempts against the Quinn Hughes, Philip Hronek line. Meanwhile, the Canucks players were running it up to the tune of 11 to 19 shot attempts with Scheifele on the ice. So they dominated, and they dominated the top of the Jets lineup on Saturday. Hey, 4 in a row after sweeping that road trip. If your goaltender is going to get hurt, I suppose this is the spot to do it, with the team playing so well and particularly suffocating on the defensive side of things. I mean, Tocchet was praised in the defensive effort through the Carolina road trip, the California road trip.
I was anxious to go see DeSmith's numbers. I thought, the shared shutout there after the fabulous outing versus the Anaheim Ducks. I'm going to go check out DeSmith's numbers. He may have remedied all of the hurt from the Minnesota Wild game. Well, he only faced 10 shots because the Canucks are playing so well defensively right now. Poor Casey DeSmith's save percentage is not getting any help. He's played marvelous these last game and a half. He's allowed 1 goal. He's only faced 28 shots over the 94 minutes of action that he's played over the course of those 2 games. So that actually hasn't helped his save percentage a whole lot at all. His goals against has certainly taken a big of a boost. And that's the other good news here, is that imagine if this injury happens after the Minnesota game, Matt. Imagine the angst over letting, DeSmith take the ball and run with it after the Minnesota game. Well, he's feeling a lot better about his game. I think fans are feeling a lot better about his game, both how he's playing, but also because how the team is playing. This is a much better defensive team over the last week and a half.
More from JPAD, this on Casey DeSmith, and Jeff went through the game log last year. He did start 8 straight games for the Pittsburgh Penguins and posted a 4-3-1 record. He also had a run of 4 straight starts at one point, and then a pair of 3-game runs in Pittsburgh. So he has carried the mail to a lesser degree than a starter, but he has carried the mail in the past. Now,
and that's the good news about what you just talked about with the schedule, is that with the spreading out of games, him playing 4 games in a row, 5 games in a row, takes us all the way to Monday the 25th.
Right. The bad news is that Casey DeSmith had his worst year last year in the National Hockey League, whilst carrying that mail. A 317 goals against average, which is 36 points worse than his career average. A 905 save percentage, which is 6 points worse than his career save percentage. So he has very much been one of the NHL's best backups. And on the limited small sample that we have in terms of him being a, starting goalie or even a co-starting goalie, the numbers have dipped a little from there.
So you said 8 games last year. If Demko's gone for a full 3 weeks, it's 7 games. So, that to me, that's probably 6 DeSmith starts, and you hand over 1 to.
That was my next question.
To one of the AHL boys.
Are we going to see Archer's?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you do.
Or is it going to be Tortorella, the way things are going down there?
Yeah, and it could be either. Whoever is the apple of Ian Clark's eye in the moment, I think probably gets that start. But you got the Montreal Canadiens on the 21st. Montreal's been rather stripped down. Calgary seems to have found its proper level. They were operating on fumes there for the first couple of games after the trades, but they seem to be sagging. So I would say one of those 2 games in the middle, because that's the one busy-ish stretch, is they play 4 games in 7 nights in the middle of the month. So take one of those middle games out of the mix and give it to one of the AHL boys.
And if you haven't been following, the story in Abbotsford has been quite interesting, because Sheilofs, who came in as the starter, has played 33 games, winning 15 with the 274 goals against and a 907 save percentage. Tortorella has gotten a fair amount of work down there. He's played 24 games, 283 goals against. He's won 14 of them.
And the save percentage?
907.
The same. So do you go with the guy who's got the NHL size, or do you go with the guy who's got the experience and the World Championship experience last year for Sheilofs? I mean,
well, Tortorella is a big boy too.
No, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you worried about Sheilofs' size?
No. I'm just saying the strapping Tortorella is certainly tantalizing. If he can back it up with good technique as well.
Yeah. And Tortorella has played professional games, both in the KHL, very small sample there, but then in the second division of Swedish hockey. So needless to say, the National Hockey League would be a big step up for him. And as you may recall, Sheilofs did reasonably well in a 5-game cameo with the Vancouver Canucks last year, posting 3 wins, a 908 save, and a 275 goals against with a really terrible team.
Yeah, if you can
that's the other thing we should mention. Like, this team and Rick Tockett's style of hockey should be able to insulate the goaltender to a much larger degree than what Thatcher Demko and company have experienced over the last several years.
And I'll say that about Sheilofs. So he gets thrust into those games last year, comes up with a 908 save percentage and a 3-2 record. I don't think anybody expected what he gave in the World Championships last year. He seems to have a sense of occasion, is my point. Rising to meet challenges. I mean, I think
I would be surprised if it's not Sheilofs, put it that way. If in fact you do have to go down to a third goaltender. And look, this is the sort of thing that we've learned. Now, some of it was pandemic related, but it seems the trend in the National Hockey League these days is understand you're probably going to have to go 3 goaltenders deep during the 82-game regular season grind, and understand you may need to play 2 goaltenders in the Stanley Cup playoffs, which was almost never a thing in yesteryear, right? It was something that you maybe were forced into via injury, but not something that you chose to do. And yet in the Stanley Cup playoffs, we are seeing head coaches go, I ain't got time to bleed. This guy may have got us there, or this guy may have the better resume, but if he's not playing well in this series, I've got to move on. And that's part and parcel
of
what
scoring's up too.
Talking about for years, and that it's not necessarily the most credentialed goalie that wins in the playoffs. It's the goalie who's hot at the right moment, kind of like the baseball player who finds his groove in October and hits the ball well, regardless of what his career stats or his seasonal stats.
Well, I think
maybe.
I think the league is more offensive now than it was 10 years ago. And I think the skill level overall in the league is higher than it was 10 years ago. So I think your goalie has a chance of looking human, a better chance of looking human on any given night than maybe they did 10 years ago.
Well, Thatcher Demko has been more than human, the third star of the week from the National Hockey League, or part of the 3 stars this week from the National Hockey League. It also goes down as a team shutout on Saturday night. Only the third in the history of the Vancouver Canucks. Now, I can remember covering some baseball where from time to time, depending on how the pitchers are used, and remember, starters have to go 5 innings to qualify for the win, where you'd get a starter yanked early because he gives up runs. More recently, it's been because he's reaching his pitch limit or matchups, what have you. And the official scorer gets to award the win. You familiar with that? There are games in baseball where the official scorer looks at the roster of pitchers who played for the winning team and identifies which one he thinks is most deserving of the victory. Grady, goalie guy.
Yes.
If you had to play the role of official scorer and award the shutout on Saturday night, which way are you going?
Demko. I'll stick with he was in the net with the game-winning goal when he was present on the ice. Quickly back to the 3-man rotation system of goaltenders. Abbotsford has Zach Zachenko in the wings this year. Now, he hasn't dressed in a game, but I was just looking up Ben Lipka and Dave Hall talking. He just recently dressed for the first time this season in a game. So he hasn't played any games. He got 7 NHL games under his belt. I'm not saying he's going to be the one called up, but there goes to show you that sometimes a guy can be the odd man out, just waiting his turn.
He hasn't even played ECHL games this year. He hasn't played at all.
He's getting the Michael DiPietro treatment.
Oh, God.
That's a tough life.
Boy, that is a very tough life.
Yeah, he dressed the other day, which got people upset because they thought there was not upset. They tweaked people because Podkolzin didn't dress and neither did he in that game down in versus the Ontario Reigns. So people thought a trade was up, and of course that did not come to pass.
The Vancouver Canucks are now 19-10-3 versus playoff teams. This is the other 15 teams that were sitting on playoff spots as of Sunday in the Western and Eastern Conference. Can we retire the don't play well against the best teams narrative, or is that going to require the Canucks to still win a few more of these marquee games going forward?
Yeah, I mean,
again, the record isn't as good when you narrow it to the top of the top, but over the playoff field, it is. I mean, gosh, over the playoff field, you're almost winning 2 out of every 3.
But it's a moving target. Vegas was a juggernaut 4 weeks ago. Now they don't qualify in that stat anymore.
So they qualify in the playoff stat, but not
in
if
the
we
elite stat. No.
Yeah.
So, who are we talking about? I think people want to see them beat the Colorado Avalanche.
That was my next one. Does it just mean a win against the Colorado Avalanche?
I think that's it.
And they'll get their chance Wednesday at Rogers Arena.
Yeah, honestly, it's perfect timing because they are the last, to me, remaining question mark for the Canucks to look good against. Because beat Stars, beat the Jets.
They got wins against everybody else.
Everybody else. They've proven.
Except for Philly.
Yeah, well, you're not too worried about Philly. They may not even make the playoffs. Heck, they don't even have their coach right now. So more on that in a moment. No, I think, and it's too bad that it's not Demko, so you get a truer representation of what's going on. But in some regards, my goodness, imagine DeSmith beats the Avs and looks good doing it. I mean, that would be just an extra feather in the cap here as the Canucks go in search of a 5th straight win.
And go in search of a 20th victory with Carson Soucy in the lineup.
As long as they have Soucy, doesn't matter who's in net,
they
right?
just can't lose. This extraordinary run of play with Carson Soucy, now 19-3-2 when the big defenseman is in the lineup. And of those 3 losses, 2 of them were in the first 2 games he played this year against Tampa and Philly way back in October. So in the last 22 games with Carson Soucy, they've lost once, they've lost 2 beyond regulation, and have 19 victories.
So with him in midseason form, they're 19-1-2. Took a couple of games to shake the rust off coming back from that injury.
And he's aligning on the right side, Blake. And this is something that the coaching staff, Rick Tocchet and Adam Foote, have been hesitant to get to. And frankly, because of the injuries they've had on defense and the timing of the injuries they've had on defense, they haven't had to go down this road often earlier in the season. That said, if they're going to play their best 6 defensemen in the Stanley Cup playoffs,
somebody's got to be on the right.
It means one of the lefties is over playing the right side, unless you want to make the case that Noah Juleson is going to bypass Eric Cole in what's left of the regular season 16 games. But a right side of Hronek, Myers, and Soucy, Myers, and of course the left side featuring Quinn Hughes, Eric Cole, and whoever else.
Zadorov.
Yeah. Right. Speaking of, learned a fair bit about him on After Hours.
Oh, he's a character. He's a character, all right. But I think the Canucks fans are looking forward to a day where all 6 defensemen, the top 6 defensemen, are in the lineup, and would be interested to see, like, if all 6 are in, Soucy's over on the right, who's the third pair right side? Like, they've been, as much as
I think it's,
you want to say it's Myers, but they just love giving Myers minutes.
Right.
They just do.
well, I think it's either Soucy or Myers.
Well, clearly.
Yeah.
But
and
who is
honestly, it may well be who's going.
Yep. Could be.
So, Nikita Zadorov. He's the rare Russian tall poppy in the National Hockey League. Likes to stand out for the suit game, the style game. He said he wasn't a fashion icon. He aspired to be one. He said Austin Matthews was a fashion icon in the National Hockey League. Did you see that? He's asked to comment on the shoe game. Dave Tomlinson is wearing, as he points out, oh, those are Vans. Did you skateboard over here? So he's throwing shade on DT for the sneak. He doesn't like the sneakers with the shoe.
Oh, yeah.
He wants to class it up.
Yeah.
He said he loves Vancouver. His kids are American, incidentally. They were born in the States. He talked about how he wants to retire here in North America after hockey. He talked about speaking out on the war and supporting the Ukrainian people by just saying, hey, he's a straightforward person and felt he should say something. And he's also the dressing room DJ in the room. And when asked what he likes to play, he didn't commit to any specific genre of music. He says he likes to be specific, sort of read the room a little bit. When they were in LA, he was playing like Dre and Tupac and, music that was consistent with their location. Other times he looks around, figures out the mood, and comes up with the musical selection.
Like a good DJ does.
Yes.
I'm stuck on a rare Russian tall poppy. There's a lot of Russian characters in the league.
Really?
Kuzmenko, Ovechkin.
Yeah.
Did you see Kuznetsov getting the award from Brindamore in the dressing room the other day?
No.
Yeah, like lots of personality. Yeah.
You know what? You're right. I mean, it all changed with Kovalchuk and Ovechkin to a degree. We were accustomed to Russians barely saying anything, barely.
Yes. The somber, smoldering Russian.
Getting to know anything about Russian players for the longest while. I mean, that's still the case with a number of Russians around the league.
I mean, hockey is a rule.
I mean, a drunk Kucherov, he's the tall poppy too, but I think you got to get him drunk first. Give me a break. Patrick Allvin also on After Hours with Scott Oak and Dave Tomlinson, and reiterated they wanted to add a player. They weren't able to do that. Further sort of gave us evidence that it was a small pool of guys they were looking at. He had the comment on Friday about quality of players who were out there and mentioned on Saturday that they had identified a couple of players, but it wasn't a long list. And he also said he did not believe so when asked point blank if the Carolina offer for Elias Pettersson was the catalyst to getting a long-term extension done here.
Yeah, I think he wants to shy away from the topic entirely.
We've got him signed. Now, don't speak of Elias Pettersson.
Yeah, the past doesn't matter. It's like what they say to Lindholm right now. You're here with us. The deadline is passed. Let's not speak of prior days.
Speaking of, Rick Tocchet over the weekend sort of implied with his comments that Phil Kessel maybe wasn't all that willing or ready to play AHL games, and that's why he's not signed here as a deadline reinforcement. We had wondered about Kessel, whether this was legit, whether this was the Canucks kind of doing him and his representative a favor. Anyways, that situation didn't work out.
Did you guys hear BX's big tinfoil conspiracy on that?
What's that?
Bringing him in to get a scouting report on the Golden Knights.
Yeah,
not.
I mean,
Like he's going to share all the information about the Golden Knights. They're going to pick
Probably
his
not.
brain. Belichick used to do this. Pick up a guy who used to play for next week's opponent, keep him through the week, get the intel, then cut him the next
See ya.
Monday.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm sure it helps, but it's not like it's going to be this like
Yeah.
war chest
Well,
of information.
Also,
He said it
because
smirkingly.
hockey doesn't have scripted plan plays to the
Right.
same
Yeah.
degree as basketball and football, where so much of the sport is determined by the spontaneous bounces of a frozen rubber disc.
To poke a hole in the Kessel won't play AHL games too. Like he might just have an ego about it and not want to do it. But here's the thing: if let's say he signed on the weekend or on Friday, there are 4 straight games at home. He could be living in Yaletown and playing for the Abbey Canucks for 4 straight games. So it would have been pretty easy for him to get those games under his belt.
Fallout from the deadline and what the Vegas Golden Knights did by using all that LTIR space and making the trade for San Jose's Tomas Hertl at the death. I saw Elliot Friedman report on the weekend that there are some GMs that are grumbling a little bit about this. Of course, nothing can be done in the current CBA, but it's got a couple more years left on it. And that maybe we're moving towards a world where players who are on LTI, on injured reserve at the end of the season, are ineligible to play the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs as a safeguard against bringing back the guy.
I was wondering what
in
you're going to
game
come up
one.
with. Yeah.
Well, that look, and Elliot was very clear. Look, this hasn't even reached the proposal stage yet. It's more just guys thinking aloud what can be done if we do believe that teams are not being fully honest, not within the spirit of the CBA, by loading up with players, salaried players at the deadline with huge salary players on LTIR, and then bringing those LTIR players back for game one. We saw the Roberto Luongo tweet last week with the Kevin Nash gif of getting out of the wheelchair, fake broken leg, and climbing into the wrestling ring. You have to think that the Florida Panthers finished second to Noah Hannafin last week, and that there was some griping and grumbling there because Mark Stone is LTIR'd and everyone suspects that he will be back for the Stanley Cup playoffs. Although the injury sounds significant enough, we shall see on that.
Now, for
Needless
those
to say, in the here and now, it's allowed Vegas to go out and make trades for Hannafin and Hertl, not to mention Anthony Mantha, which is quite a deadline haul.
For those of you screaming at your devices right now, going, they should just keep the cap for the playoffs. They will never do that because they've already had several historic examples that show that had there been a cap in the playoffs, there would be teams going almost halfway roster deep into their American League team. So effectively a first place team, you could have a team that, was sitting in first place, like the Canucks, that suffers devastating injuries in the springtime, that all of a sudden is icing effectively an AHL lineup in the playoffs, which is not what they want.
No, that's a quality of play, quality of entertainment issue.
Yeah.
I mean, Stanley Cup playoffs get bad enough as we go on.
Right.
Through injury and
You're starting with a
fatigue
half of an AHL
right.
team.
I mean, the first round is usually the best round by way of entertainment, right? Like come the conference finals, you often have some really sloggy hockey going on. All of this, of course, the season too damn long. Don't need 82, but of course the Governors need to, satiate their greed. I'm not sure I would agree with the entirety of a full series to be missed, but 2 to 3 games, because a full series to be missed also gets down to the quality of entertainment, the quality of play.
It does.
So force them to make the decision. Can we win a playoff series without so-and-so if they have to miss the first 3 games?
You know what I would do? I'd say 4.
4?
Because that way you got to win a game.
Got to win one.
You got to win one.
Got to win one to stay alive until you get your horse back.
Yeah.
I just hope they fix it. Like, it's become a little much.
I like it.
And it's particularly become a little much in conjunction with the income tax-free jurisdictions in the league. Florida, Texas, Vegas, and Nevada, which looks like it's already becoming a competitive strategic advantage for those clubs and may well be an even bigger competitive and strategic advantage for those clubs as this cap rises and we're talking about more money.
Yeah,
and more take-home pay in those jurisdictions. Remember, we used to have the Canadian Equalization Fund on the doll. You do wonder whether there's a mechanism in. You're not going to be able to do anything about income tax laws state by state.
Governments are not folding
they're
because
not
of the NHL.
to the NHL.
No.
So, how do you equalize or how do you mitigate the difference between a guy signing, say, with the Dallas Stars and on the same amount of total money taking home, 10, 15, 20%, whatever the case may be, more than if the guy is playing in a more heavily taxed jurisdiction, for example, BC.
Yeah. Well, there'd be a slush fund for that.
Well, it's just that's something else that's coming down the pipeline, whether Gary Bettman is going to acknowledge it or not.
That Gustav Forsling signing from, what was it, Friday or wherever it was.
Yeah, it seemed low.
Because of the Florida tax issue. Like if that's another team or if he's on the open market, he's getting 6 plus 6.5.
He and his agent are asking for more. Mm-hmm. And so it's effectively become a cap savings for the Florida Panthers, right?
Except that it only again, you can be traded in any moment. So that has to come with a no move clause. If you're gonna grind me to a lower number on the cap because you say there's less tax.
Did he get a no move?
I need to get a no move clause if I'm Gustav Forsling.
You give him more in bonus.
No trade protection at all for Forsling.
Okay.
That gets into
but Grady makes a good point. If a huge part of it is upfront and signing bonus, then the taxable income is even smaller because the salary is smaller going forward.
Ask John Tavares how that's going.
John Tavares and Canadian Revenue Agency are in a legal proceeding right now to deal with some of this.
So for the first 5 years of that Forsling contract, his base salary is $1 million, and it's 5.5 of bonus.
Yeah. So he's getting all his money in Florida where it's safe from tax. And then whatever he's making salary-wise going forward, if he does happen to be traded, well, at least he's not as tax susceptible if it's one of these bigger tax jurisdictions. Anyways, something else to take a look at. Our old friend, John Tortorella, head coach of the Philadelphia Flyers. In Tampa, where he won a Stanley Cup in 2004 with the Lightning. They were having their 20-year reunion. Some of the fellas in the luxury suite, Dave Andrechuk in that lightning blue blazer, some of their other players up there. Torts gets ejected. Torts refuses to leave. And on the YouTube side, that's courtesy of Bally's. He tells the officials he's not leaving, which proves that not only can John Tortorella storm, he can also hold a position. So he's got the two basic requirements
Look at the guys
of
laughing.
an infantryman. Yeah.
They love it.
Captain Greg Bell would approve. He will surge forward. He will also hold a position. He ultimately does leave on his own volition. He has been suspended for 2 games. The Flyers chairman saying whatever the fine is, he will take care of it.
And that's the
And
downside.
the guys in the box, yes, we're having an absolute kick.
That's the downside of his position, though, is he is so resolute, so steadfast that he is staying on the bench. Only moments later, leaving.
I'm not leaving.
And you're thinking, wow, this is coming to a head, until it doesn't. And he meekly walks off the bench.
So,
He goes out.
like, was forfeiture on the table here?
Yeah, I mean,
Like bench penalty, another bench penalty? Like, what was the recourse for the officials here if Tortorella wasn't going to leave?
I would guess it's a never-ending run of unsportsmanlike conduct bench penalties, I would guess. So then he just completely sewers his team even further. Now, what point in the game was this? Do you remember? Was it in the
It's
third?
like 10 minutes gone. They're down 4-0. They're getting walloped.
In the first.
First, yeah.
See, I don't think you would want that, because then he risks, if he puts like a major for unsportsmanlike conduct on the board, like then
Well, they lost it.
you become the reason, though, that they lose like 9-0. Like, I don't think anybody wants that.
Well, what did they wind up losing? Was it 7-2? Did I
7-0.
7-0.
Got spanked.
I mean, it already got there.
Well, and part and parcel, knowing towards, was that effectively like him calling a timeout and screaming at them? Like, we probably have no chance to win this game, but if I cause a big scene here, maybe I get my players' attention and maybe they play a little harder when we have a snowball's chance of digging out of a 4-0 deficit.
I don't know, but you sort of make it sound like it's not their fault. Like, chances are at 4-0, your team probably has not played very well.
Probably not, no.
And then you kind of refusing to leave, it makes it sound like you're absolving them, that it's the ref's fault that they're down 4-0. Which, well, maybe.
I mean,
maybe he
I
believes
guess
that.
it could be interpreted that way. It's sometimes hard to interpret coaches and what they do. Although I must say, Torts tended to be a little more straightforward than your average.
It was
fan.
2 power play goals as part of that 4-0 lead, so maybe that was some of the issue.
Anyways, we're all, hey, the lesson here is, if you're an assistant coach on John Tortorella's bench,
Brad Shaw,
be prepared to get the big whistle.
former Canucks assistant.
Mhm.
That's right. Saw Mike Sullivan here in Vancouver when he got suspended for storming the Flames room, and now Brad Shaw.
But it's also a lesson. Keep John Tortorella in this
the
league.
Yes.
However, make sure he's not on my team. Like, whoever the fan is that's speaking that
Right.
is thinking, I want him in the league, just not my team, please.
And funny enough, the guy that he called out in that presser was the one that broke the 2-game suspension news. So funny little
Anthony
caveat to that.
DeMarco?
DeMarco, yeah. I'm sure he loved reporting that one.
Although, Torts has got the most out of Philly this year too, right? He still
He
does have the ability
has
to coach
done
to some degree.
an extraordinary job. Now, and I'll give Saravelli credit there in Philly, because he told us at the beginning of the year, guys, watch, Philadelphia is going to be competitive, because this is exactly the sort of team that John Tortorella wants to coach. A team that has no expectations on it. In fact, has many doubters telling them, no, you can't. That way he can go in and say, guys, we have to have
Full buy-in.
a full buy-in effort to defensive detailed hockey, do the utmost to protect our goaltender, counterattack, take our chances when they present themselves, not otherwise, and we'll win our fair share of hockey games. Blake, they have 192 goals on the season. That is far and away the fewest amongst playoff teams in the East, with the exception of the Islanders sitting on the final playoff.
Who are breathing
spot.
down their necks now. Who are in a playoff spot.
They're -2 goal differential on the season, and yet are 33, 24, and 8 for 74 points, clinging to that third spot in the Metropolitan Division. But, of course, would then fall to a wild card where they would be in a dogfight with the Red Wings and maybe even the Capitals.
The Islanders
spot.
And the Red Wings have games in hand on the Flyers that if they win them, the Flyers drop down.
The Islanders won 6 in a row. Detroit's lost 5 in a row, and Yzerman did very little.
Yeah.
Trade deadline.
But still, they've lost 5 in a row. If they win their next game, they're tied with the Flyers.
Congratulations to Vancouver's Dante Fabro. He has got a new contract with the Nashville Predators, a 1-year, $2.5 million deal for next season. So Dante won't be coming home. At least we wouldn't suspect so.
Mm-hmm.
We say that because Dante's family, the Fabros, buy up like hundreds of tickets each and every time the Nashville Predators and Dante are here. Barry Trotz has done some interesting deadline deal. They have re-signed a lot of their role players there in Nashville. He gave a 2-year deal to Mark Jankowski, Blake. And I was like, 2 years for a fourth-line centerman. And we all remember Jankowski was kind of a project first-round pick of the Calgary Flames once upon a time. Took a big swing on a big centerman going, this guy hits. Well, he's turned out to be nothing better than a fourth-liner. The Nashville Predators carry him through the season. Blake, I had to double-check. He had like 2 goals and 4 points. They give him a 2-year deal. He goes out, he has games with back-to-back assists and then a 2-point game yesterday. So there you go. You re-sign your role players and you get the role player bounce. Oh my God, I can't believe I got a 2-year deal. I'm going to finally score some this year.
So they were paying him for future contributions rather than past contributions.
Yeah, and it works.
Yeah.
Well done, Barry Trotz in the Nashville Predators. We'll see if Fabro goes on a tear here.
Potential first-round matchup against the Canucks.
Exactly. You don't want this smoke. You don't wish for this
You don't
smoke.
want this Jankowski smoke.
Well, but here's the thing. If not for the pulled goaltender, and we'll get to this story in hashtags against the Minnesota Wild, the Nashville Predators, they're 8-0-2 in their last 10. Had the 8-game winning streak going on. Have vaulted not only back into the playoff race, but into the first wild card at 78 points. Well done, Nashville Predators.
I believe Mark Jankowski was a John Wise project.
Yeah, he was.
If I'm not
He definitely
mistaken.
was.
Yeah.
But how many
He might be the best John Wise broad project ever, in fact. So,
well, there have been a few players over our history of chronicling drafts together, partner, where we've been like, okay, in the first round. He was one of them, 21st overall in 2012. And yeah, Blake, until he had this run of the last 3 games, he was on 2 goals for the season.
well, a few,
2 goals
not
in
a lot of
16
games.
games.
Yeah, not a lot of games.
And that was up to 6 points in 16 games.
This is amongst his better paces of the last 6 years, though.
He was 12 points in 50 games last year.
Yeah.
And with that, we have reached our Mark Jankowski
Yeah,
quota
exactly.
for
Yeah,
the
indeed.
day.
Apologies. Yeah.
Let's tell you about our friends at Park Casino, the official casino resort of the Vancouver Canucks. And we're going to be live on a location there on Wednesday from 6 to 7 p.m. doing a show in advance of the game against the Colorado Avalanche. Come on down and say hello. We're going to do some prizes on site. Receive 15% off the game day menu at BC Kitchen, where we'll be located with your game day ticket. Park is just steps away from Rogers Arena. You'll get to puck drop and sign up for the Encore Rewards. You get $10 free play to use in the Canucks gaming corner. Looking forward to making it to Park on Wednesday. That's Wednesday, March 13th.
I think we can call it a pregame show because it's right before the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's use that word.
7:30 start.
7:30 start, incidentally, on Wednesday. Yes, there are a couple of these 7:30 start. Well, we've seen a couple of 7:30 starts already, and we got another one. We got another one on Wednesday. Did you know?
You going to be able to stay awake for that? I know you've been
I'm sure
falling
hoping-
asleep pretty early these days.
I think I got through the Oscars, and that was that last night.
Oh, good for you.
Didn't even watch it. Didn't even know it was on.
You should check it out.
Gosling stole the show,
He did.
Grady.
He did. The Canadian
Don't
boy.
care.
Mhm. Did you
Cared
know the
enough to
game?
comment, though.
Did you know the game against the Kings later this month? Monday is at 6 p.m. It's a 6 p.m. start. time?
Oh,
And did you know they've got a matinee against the Anaheim Ducks on the 31st of this month? It's a 12:30 start.
This has been the matinee season for the Vancouver Canucks.
Well, the 2 Monday holiday matinees they've played in the U.S.
They played an entire weekend of matinees, Saturday,
That's
Sunday,
right.
double. days.
yeah.
So
Detroit, Washington.
Detroit and Washington.
it's been weird.
So good reminder. Don't assume they're all 7 p.m. starts
Yeah, it's true.
going forward. It's been a different year in that regard. All right.
We also got a 12:30 Sunday against the Ducks at home.
Is he listening? We talked about that.
Did we?
Yeah. You just literally did.
I literally just mentioned that.
Also, they had a lot of matinees this season.
Let's get to today's menu. It is brought to you by Greta, 50 West Cordova. Fantastic spot, pre-game, post-game, during the game. They got the incredible arcade going on there. You're going to want to participate. Check them on out, 50 West Cordova or gretabar.com. On the podcast side, we got a welcome mat coming up here. Patrick Johnston of the Province and Post Media. We missed Patrick last week. He was busy co-hosting Canucks Conversation with David Quadrelli, as well as doing his writing for the Province. Had a story on Tucker Poolman's contract being a complication for the Canucks going forward. Also get into all the different topics with Patrick, whether that's the trade deadline, whether that's Thatcher Demko's injury, Casey DeSmith, Carson Soucy, Ilya Mikheyev. I believe Mark Friedman is discussed. We got a Mark Friedman. Well, because Friedman may have to play here, right? Because of not getting the depth defenseman. We'll do some hashtags, the best and worst of Twitter, including Arizona Coyotes not paying their bills. And I don't mean the team. Plus, the Whitecaps were in action this week. They got a victory, and a good victory at that. We'll get into that. Russell Wilson to the Steelers. The BC Lions losing a legendary head coach, and more as the NFL free agency season is upon us.
In a season like this, you never want to miss a single second of what's happening on the ice, and you want to be around your fellow fans, right? Well, Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova, the perfect spot to do so. Hey, if you've got tickets, a great place to pre and post. They've got drink specials every single day. And if you don't have tickets, well, stick around and soak up the atmosphere with all your fellow fans, play all the great video games and air hockey, great air hockey setup as well at Greta Bar YVR. We'll see you there, 50 West Cordova.
Great Clips is the official hair salon of the National Hockey League. There are 37 salons in Vancouver and the Lower Mainland, all Canadian owned and operated. Download the app and find the nearest to you. When you're up next for a cut, you'll get a ready next text. Great Clips. It's going to be great. Patrick Johnston is quite cross with me, Blake. We were pushing his hit all last week until we got to Friday, the day about nothing, the show about nothing. I said, don't worry, you're on Canucks Conversation. We'll catch up with you Monday. So this hit has been a long time in the making. He joins us now, the beat writer from the
sure he
Province
missed us, yeah.
And Post Media. Well, even worse, I pushed his previous hit into March, which means he's got to wait another 30 days to invoice it. So he's some upset with me, and he's got good reason to.
Yeah.
How
As
are
I
you?
said before, Matt, you only did this to yourself. The invoice part, you only did this to yourself.
I apologize. Thank you for being so flexible with
We
us.
wanted more things to talk about, and by giving you the weekend,
Exactly.
Demko's injury gave us more stuff to talk
There was
about.
nothing to talk about
Yeah.
Friday, as you can attest by sitting in with Quadrelli on Canucks Conversation. But let's just start there. Were you surprised they weren't able to get anything done?
I had thought they would add like a defenseman. And then when I saw Chad Ruedel become a New York Ranger, I'm like, all right, nothing's happening. I guess this is where we're at. Yeah, I was a little surprised. I think I had that feeling on Wednesday, talking to Jim Rutherford and just sort of getting a sense of, okay, what are they thinking around the edges? That they're not probably, they know where they're at. They know the price for a Gensel Gensel certainly was going to be big. Obviously seeing the Toffoli deal, a little surprised. Maybe they weren't able to find they don't have a ton of mid-tier prospects, but a mid-tier prospect that maybe makes it look a little better. So yeah, I'm a little surprised nothing at all happened.
So you thought they should have beat the price on Toffoli?
Well, I don't know if I certainly he would make this team a lot better, right? Like I think he adds a lot to this lineup.
Would you have given the 25 first round pick for Tyler Toffoli? Well,
given the argument, in the end, I do buy the case that Alvin made, which is why I asked him about Pettersson's signing. And he said, yeah, he joked about an 8-year window. But if you really think about it, and I wrote about this on Friday afternoon, Pettersson signing locks in what's clearly a minimum 3-year window, because that's how much longer Quinn Hughes' contract goes for. You know what your core is. So you don't have to make moves now just to make moves, right? The team's playing well. You got to feel comfortable with your team. I think they're right to feel comfortable with their team. That doesn't mean they won't go forward. You know, they have decisions. They've got a mountain of free agents to deal with this summer. So in the end, I go back and forth, because they couldn't exactly match what Winnipeg did, right? Like, they could do next year's second, but they don't really have a third. They have a third. You offer the Devils the other half of that conditional pick. You're going to have to add something else. So they don't and maybe in the end the Devils just weren't interested. Maybe it was there. Maybe they did say, I don't know. I haven't really done any sniffing around on that. But that to me would have been what the question was. Are we willing to give up Kirill Kudryavtsev? Like, I don't know even who would qualify.
Yeah.
And that's where I kind of, like I said, I get it. Like it is that challenge of all these guys. If you want to keep Hronek, if you want to keep Zadorov, you know, there's other decisions they're going to have to make. I know others mentioned this before, but, you know, you're going to have to think long and hard about Brock Besser, and how you're aligning your money up and where it's all going to go.
You mentioned defenseman off the top without adding a defenseman. It means that if the Canucks go on a 2 to 3, certainly 3 round run in the playoffs or beyond, because we've seen the playoffs, it means we'll see Mark Friedman in the playoffs. Like that. That's just what this means.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
He's been all right. You know, I haven't had moments going, oh man, Friedman's in the lineup, but you certainly the zip is, you know, there's as you would expect. Yeah, there's less sizzle. You get down to 8, 9. You know, Matt Irwin's been up a couple times. I suppose we'll see Matt Irwin. Maybe we'll see Christian Wolanin somehow. Jet Wu maybe. But yeah, the barrel is pretty
scraped.
Scraped. Thank you. Gosh, I dug in this metaphor that I knew was going nowhere. Thank you. Yeah, it's pretty scraped. So
it's a pretty good barrel, though. I mean, like, it's not bad. You know, it's a nice oak, sturdy.
The barrel's nice. Yes, absolutely.
Smells nice, well constructed.
Nice, yeah.
Good strapping
from the Highlands.
Strapping
from the Highlands of Scotland. No, it's a decent barrel. Tucker Poolman was once in that barrel.
Yep.
And you wrote about how he's the one screwing everything up right now, or his contract is the one screwing it all up. Patrick, explain.
Well, Farhan turned to me at some point. We were talking about this, and he goes, so let's think about this. You know, they came in, the cap was a mess. 2 years later, what's still there? And I said, well, technically Myers, because obviously the player has been playing well, but the price point is for a different player. But other than that, they've kind of uncorked the rest of that. So the last thing left is that Poolman deal, which in the end you would like him to be playing. He started the beginning of the last season in the lineup, and while we were in that press conference on Friday, Alvin kept talking about LTI, and the only reason they're now in LTI that they can't actually accrue any space is because they have this Tucker Poolman deal that just sits there and moves up and down depending on who's in the lineup, but is consistently over the cap and using the LTI cap exemption. And so I literally had the moment in my head. I sat there and, you know, they do the pass the mic around thing, and I'd done my questions and it kind of came up. I had the mic in my hand and I blanked and I couldn't remember what the heck I was going to ask, you know, and so I handed it back and we were walking out. I was walking with the quads. We were coming back to the studio and it all of a sudden hit me. So I texted Alvin. He's not a big texter, but you never know. I said, listen, would you entertain a question based on something you said that I meant to ask with blank? He said, what's the question? And I said, have you explored trading Poolman? And he went, yes. Because, yeah, you could get it. Like, you take that off the books and all of a sudden they're $1 million under the cap today, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Like, that's a lot of money they could be accruing. All of a sudden they are using the cap to their advantage.
Well, the accruing part is huge for people to understand here, that every passing day, the cap space gets theoretically bigger, and you can't do that in LTIR.
It's a year-long budget, and if you spend less than your daily budget, that money, you can use it later. It's
Yeah.
it is. This is how the system works. I know people yell and scream about LTI and teams taking advantage of it, but you know what? Like, you should be using every avenue in front of you. One of them is simply not being at the cap, and a lot of teams haven't done that. But if the Canucks did find their way out of this, and I can see perhaps in the end why there are other teams that do not want to dance with them because they can see the material advantage it would bring the Canucks to do so. You can get it. I mean, the Arizona as dumping ground. I mean, there is that theory out there that Arizona simply exists to deal with other people's cap problems, but if I don't know. I haven't gone and looked into it. I'm not sure he would be based on how I understand the NHL's insurance policy works. But conceivably, he could have an insured that contract could be insured, and then nobody's the insurance company's paying for it. But
they've only got one retained contract right now. The Coyotes they've got 2 slots available.
Yeah, but they dumped. I mean, in the end, what did they do on Friday? They just got rid of cash. That's all they care about, right? Like It's an absolute joke of a team. The owner is. Who knows if the owner has the money, right? Like, they dumped contracts. It was all cash. They traded Troy Stetcher, didn't retain anything. They traded Matt Dumba, didn't retain anything. They got rid of all these raw salary contracts.
But what's your understanding of trading Poolman? Do you actually have to pay Poolman, or is it all on insurance anyway?
Well, that's what I'm asking. So, from how I understand, I haven't asked, but from what I understand how the insurance policy works is that there's a not unreasonable chance that Poolman's contract isn't insured because you can't insure every contract. Essentially what happens is your top players get insured, and then there's usually a few others you can ask about, and the insurer may go for it, but sometimes the insurer said no. And I don't know if they were, insurer at this point will turn around and say, we'll give you a policy on that. They couldn't get one on Michael Furlan, for instance. Like, they did ask, and the insurer said no.
Hey, good news with the Coyotes. There's the first NHL team selling their own streaming service. They debuted this a couple of weeks ago. I'm sure it is not just a last-minute cash grab by the owners to take your money on their way out the door.
Both subscribers say it is a great product.
Exactly. 2 subscribers agree. Thumbs up.
4 out of the 5.
Can I ask this follow-up by way of I'm not disagreeing with you on Poolman, but I'm giving you another perspective to consider.
Sure.
As much as him being an LTR and keeping the Canucks in LTIR is not ideal, would it matter if Ilya Mikheyev was playing better hockey, or if Ilya Mikheyev in his 4 1/4 was at least tradable?
Absolutely. Now, I think at a mild pass because no one anticipates blowing out your knee in the beginning of the first year of your contract. But yeah, if Ilya Mikheyev, I think I said this to Jeff the other day. How did he score 10 goals? I mean, I will say, I think he's been a lot better the last week. He's been around the net, but at some point, and I think Tocchet said it himself, at some point the puck's just going to hit him in the chest and go in the net. But he's been playing better, but he's paid to score, and he hasn't scored in 3 games, or what is it?
It feels like his
nearly a half season.
It feels like his stick blade is only about 1.5 inches tall, so that like he can stick handle, but it jumps off his stick as readily. Like there's just nothing there.
Yeah. The wheels. There were moments. I'm starting to see bursts here and there, but there's not the straight line speed that he showed. That was like faster than Connor McDavid at one point.
Yeah.
Do you
haven't seen that?
Did you identify any buyer's remorse from Alvin on Friday? And do you think he would rather have Gensel and Tanev as opposed to Zadorov and Lindholm?
I mean, I think they still like Zadorov a lot. The price they got, the price they paid for Zadorov was next to nothing. So, even if he's not a perfect player, they're pretty happy with what he's been, certainly when he's been good. The Lindholm
quite a performance on After Hours. I learned a lot
about
Nikita Zadorov this past Saturday.
Big personality, and when he's playing in that role, I think he's the Gensel. Did Lindholm cost you Gensel? I mean, you look. I thought JD Burke laid it out well. Here's the alternative package, and you're probably giving up a fair bit for a player you're not sure you're going to be able to re-sign. And Gensel would have added a lot. Like, there's just absolutely no doubt. And you can tell that Alvin wished he lived in a different world where he'd been able to add him. There's absolutely no doubt about that. I mean, Lindholm I thought was great on Saturday. That excuse me, that line with Podkolzin and Garland, like there's something there. That's part of the story. Kenny Weeb was here from the Winnipeg Free Press, and he asked me after the game, he says, that really how they play defensively? I'm like, this is what they've been building towards. And having a spine of centers that they now have. I mean, obviously they traded for Lindholm to play with Pettersson. They thought that would be a thing, but now they're in a different world, which is perfectly fine. I think the lineup as constructed is pretty great. Absolutely. Would you like to have someone other than Ilya Mikheyev playing with Miller and Besser? Yes, absolutely. But I just don't know. The Gensel price was a challenge for this team. They have to be, when you have a 3-year window and you don't know if the guy's going to resign, you don't know if you can afford him. That's where sometimes you do want to stand still. My business buddy said, I thought the Canucks actually did the right thing. They stood still. Sometimes you have to just be quiet and the bear won't smell you. The bear won't hear you, right? Like you don't have to do things just because other people are doing things. And there are undoubtedly going to be moves they can make coming. Now, if they don't do anything as an alternative, they bring in a player that, you're not finding a Gensel equivalent, but a player that does things that helps make your lineup better with the picks or the prospects you might have moved for Gensel, and you're able to keep that player and it is better for your cap. Then we'll be talking a different story, but they've got to do that first.
Before we leave Lindholm, who's been underwhelming offensively, does a lot of the little things that a coach wants.
Yeah.
Is he, first of all, did the Canucks ruin the relationship with the Rumors? Or did somebody ruin the relationship for the Canucks with the Rumors? And secondarily, might all this play into the Canucks' hands that if they haven't had a sullied relationship with the possible trade to Boston, might Lindholm be not cheap, but pretty affordable in the offseason if they wanted to bring him back as a third-line center?
Yeah, the thought occurred to me that, I think he's going to go to free agency and see what's out there.
Sure.
The Canucks' task, obviously, now from here until whenever their season ends, is to show them what life is like here. And that is something that struck me when I talked to Rutherford. And, he mentioned this to a few people. It was clearly a talking point they had. Was, listen, the guy's barely been here. Now they're home. His fiance and his young daughter are now here, or wife are now here. Like, his family's here. They get to see what living here is like. And that's certainly a thing that matters to players, that living in Vancouver is an enticing thing for the Canucks as a recruitment tool. So you probably know what you'd like to pay him in your heart of hearts, and you know what he probably wants to get.
But he's not going to be the bell of the ball at this rate, right?
No, I don't think so.
No,
I don't think so. But
his market is very stable, and very few. Yeah. Even a struggle for the rest of the year is not necessarily going to hurt it all that much, because top two centers are just almost never available in unrestricted free agency.
Yeah, he had 64 points last year. Like, he's having a difficult season here, but he had 64 points last year, and he didn't have either of those guys playing with him anymore. Like he has had a consistent, before this season, a really strong 5 years. Like, that doesn't disappear. It's not a guarantee he'll have another 5 years like that, but the last 5 years have been pretty good.
But he did a 20-point drop. He did a 20-point drop, and it could be another 20-point drop, or 10 to 12-point drop at the very least.
The outlier is the 82-point season, absolutely, right? But you look at that player, like there's a 42 and 56 in the COVID season, 54 in the 70 in the season before the pandemic. Like, he's a guy that's in that 55 to 65 point range. Like, that's a second line center, right? Like, that's a pretty good player. Even this year, like you said, he's on 39 points. There's I've lost track, 16, 17 games to go.
16, yeah.
10 more points, that still gets him to 50. Like, that's under roughly where he's been, but that's still and that's playing, on a not very good Flames team, and then playing right now, third line minutes in Vancouver.
As long as he gets those 10 points.
Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. You're right. But that plays to your point. If he doesn't, then people are going to be like, I'm not so sure about this. He might not be looking at that long-term deal.
All right, let's get to Thatcher Demko. Have they ask you the Tim Hortons poll question? Have the Canucks leaned on Thatcher Demko too much this season?
Well, the thing that was interesting, I wanted to sit back and think about this because we talked about Casey DeSmith. The one I wanted to think about was the last month, or last 6 weeks, which has been difficult, since the All-Star game. Before his relief appearance on Saturday, Casey DeSmith had played 3 times since the All-Star break, which to me is too much Demko lately. I don't think on the season as a whole they leaned on him too heavy. There were, DeSmith, especially early, was getting a lot of game time. I would argue that yes, they leaned on Demko too much, given the rate of the last month, which is if this truly isn't a groin injury, as is being suggested, and it's something else, and it's not a big deal. We'll see. This is the blessing in disguise. Like, it was clear they needed to find a way to play him less, because what would you rather have? Him playing his 60th game of the year in game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals, or game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs, or game 60 with like 3 weeks to go, right? Like, it's just that simple. And now they're going to be forced to rest him. And I think this is it's not the way you want to do it, but it is going to be great benefit for this team.
Follow-up question. Do you feel well about them keeping first place in the division and conference with a combination of Casey DeSmith and Artur Silovs, Nikita Zadorov, whomever it may be, over a brief period?
I mean, I was taken by Jeff's point. I think it was yesterday they tweeted out, like, the Canucks go 500 and they basically win the division, because like Edmonton has to go with 16-4 or something. Like, it's like Edmonton's been playing really well. Don't get me wrong, but they also lost to Columbus and Buffalo the other day, right? Like that winning that is a huge percentage of games to win, no matter who you are. So the Canucks go 500. And there's a lot of reasons, no matter who the goalie is, that they'll go because of how they're playing. Like, I think they're going to be fine. In the
might
long
put to
run,
rest the conference championship, though, which, second wild card might be handy.
Yeah, that's difficult. And that was always going to be difficult, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that. But I mean, obviously there are incentives to finish first, because you'll get the weaker of the 2 wild cards. But at the end of the day, if the question is, are they going to be okay down the stretch? And yes, I think they will be. As for the goalie, I mean, Nikita Zadorov, I'm pretty sure has surpassed Artur Silovs on sort of the long view depth chart. At the moment, Silovs has played 5 NHL games, right? Or 6 NHL games. And he was fine. He was fine last year. So I think they'll be comfortable bringing him up. He hasn't had a great year in Abbotsford. Tolopilo is the bigger story. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they brought Tolopilo up, but it just seems strange given that DeSmith is going to play the bulk of the games. Maybe Tolopilo gets a start. Maybe they do what they did last year. I mean, if you remember, they swapped out Silovs for Colin Delia at one point and just said, let's see what this kid's got. Maybe we're going to see that time. There are some matchups coming that you can spot a start in there.
Well, there's also some stakes this year that there weren't last year. So lastly, Carson Soucy, 19-3-2 with him in the lineup. And they're trying him on the right side now. Finally, we're seeing the lefty on the right side concoction that really, to get your best 6 in the playoffs, has to be a thing.
Yeah.
Right?
No, he's been it's an amazing story. I asked him after the game on Saturday, are you truly the secret weapon? And he smiled, laughed, and he knows. Absolutely knows the stat. He said, I don't want to talk about the stats. I want to talk about my team. And to his credit, yeah. And then unfortunately, Rick Tocchet didn't really understand my question. I didn't really have a chance to follow up. I didn't worry about it too much. But I said, what does he bring? But he has been so steady when he comes in, and we see it. Like I wrote about it in preseason. Everyone kind of talked about it. His ability to use his reach is a demonstration for all tall defensemen on learn how to do that, because that is a skill that most players don't have. If you can get your stick on the other guy on the puck, that makes things a lot harder, because they're further away, and further away from their their sort of danger zone. And when you're carrying the puck, you think you have more space, more time. He gets his stick out on that puck, and all of a sudden you're having to make decisions in a spot you didn't think, and you would have to. And that's clearly his advantage. I think that he has been so influential in that standpoint.
Puck on his stick, though, he's a good decision maker.
And then,
I would say he's smarter than I gave him credit for.
Well, that was some of the knocks on him that, like he had trouble exiting the zone, clearing the zone.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been blown away at how good he's been with the puck. Like he was a defenseman I certainly was very aware of because he played in Minnesota and then played in Seattle. And you knew he was a pain in the ass to play against. Like big, tough, strong guy, made things hard. But the way he's moved the puck has been absolutely fantastic. To the point where he kind of gets these very small, very soft seconds, to be honest, on the power play. But he's that third option right now on the power play if they need someone else. If they like when they had the 5-on-3 the other night and Hronek got bumped up to the 5-on-3, Soucy was going to come out and run PP2. So yeah, the guy's having a great season. You just cross your fingers and hope he doesn't get hurt again.
Magnificent stuff.
Always.
Good thing we waited. Good thing
Good
we waited.
Start to the week, boys.
It's worth the wait.
He's like Matt Damon on Jimmy Kimmel, right?
I'm trying to avoid that scenario. Did you see the Oscars ended with that dog peeing on his star last night?
Oh,
that was the final frame of the Oscars last night. Thanks, Matt Damon. We'll catch him next week.
Take care.
Come join us at Park Casino, the official casino resort of the Vancouver Canucks, Wednesday, March 13th from 6 to 7 p.m. We're going to do a live pregame show at BC Kitchen. Prior to the game against the Avalanche, you get 15% off the game day menus with your game ticket at BC Kitchen.
Also, a great place to get pregame drinks, your prinks, if you will. $6 happy hour specials at the Center Bar, and it's all just steps away from the arena at Park. Also, with the Encore Rewards, get a $10 free play at the Canucks Gaming Corner as well. All that at Park.
Hey, everybody, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.